Good evening. Today is October the 20th, 2025, Monday. And I know there is competition this evening as it relates to the professional football team, but me not being a fan, that did not faze me with regards to putting on and broadcasting my podcast for this evening. I am scheduled to have two guests. Write-in candidate Whitney Clarke for the District 5 seat, Detroit City Council, and then the at-large candidate for City Council, James Harris. And in the meantime, in between time, I want to welcome everyone to the show this evening. As usual, for the Detroit Black and White, like, share, subscribe. And this is the Detroit in Black and White channel that was created by political strategist Adolph Mongo. And my platform is Detroit in Black and White Presents Reality Strikes with Eric Brown. And, I had a very interesting conversation earlier today with a friend of mine, a good Omega man from Michigan State University, John Sanders, and he made a very interesting point. He talked about how the issues of emotions play a role in how people view the upcoming Detroit mayoral election. As either, you for or against one candidate. And he made the point about, from his perspective, it being all about emotions. And that's one of the things that people really do need to cut down on, in my opinion. At the end of the day, we give more of a damn about being first and things of that nature. But then, also at the end of the day, what has, because there's this argument or this narrative about what's qualified, who's qualified, and or someone being a superior candidate. I find that laughable, and I find that laughable for a few reasons. Mostly due to the fact of, those that know me and know me well know that I am about research when it comes to politics. I am about right and wrong when it comes to politics. And the way people are excusing the way the violation of the city charter, I don't give a damn. Back in 2011, if only 1% of the electorate came out, that 1% dictated how that charter would have been approved. And it was approved by the city. That city charter is no different than a policy and procedure manual that you get on your job when you start with a corporation. And as if you violate parts of that policy and procedure, just no different than the city charter that was passed November 8th, 2011, went into effect January 1st, 2012. That is your policy and procedure as a city resident in Detroit, Michigan. That document was violated. I don't care how you want to shape it, how you want to form it. And even for someone to say that the corporate counsel said nothing that was done was wrong. Well, the corporate counsel is wrong, and the corporate counsel does not have anything to do with the charter commission. So it's not his or her place to say whether or not they're giving you a pass. In the past is what I'm having a problem with, people, because you all, I just find to be so amazing, want to act as if nothing was wrong, nothing was done wrong. Something was done wrong. The city charter was violated. The city charter, specifically Section 2-106.4, as it relates to gifts and gratuities. And it speaks to the fact that a public servant cannot and shall not accept gifts, gratuities, honorariums, or anything of value from any person or company. So I had a conversation recently. Someone said, well, the gift was given by a contractor that's not currently doing business with the city of Detroit. That does not mean shit. They could be doing business with the city of Detroit in the future, number one. And again, a public servant is not to accept gifts. So even if that was a gift, regardless if it was a contracted business, a vendor with the city, they accepted the gift and they asked for the gift, is the understanding of how things go. And thanks for joining me this evening, Karen Winston. And they asked for the gift. So that's a blatant violation. So moving a goalpost based on who you like is the height of hypocrisy. And there's no other way to say it. Then you have an issue of all this talk about Detroit moving forward, Detroit moving forward. And if you have a 51%, well, the numbers I'm about to give you are constant numbers over the whole period of time that a certain person has been in office. And now that person is running for the highest office in the city, the mayor. So child poverty rate is 51% in Detroit. Overall poverty, 34%, which makes Detroit the poorest city in the country. Unemployment, 9%. Yes, unemployment has gone down, but as they say, everybody else catches a cold, Black people get the flu. So the unemployment rate for Black citizens in Detroit is one of the highest in the state. Second most violent city. Median household income, $39,000, and the literacy rate is a very pathetic and abysmal 47%. And that's the adult literacy rate. The kids in the K through 12 system, 5%. So I'm going to say it another way. 95% of the kids in the city of Detroit are not proficient in reading. And that's not proficient or above proficiency rate. And if someone has not done something in a 12-year period and they're making promises about what they're going to do, to me, that means that it took running for the highest office to realize that there is a problem that has existed the whole time that you have been on the city council, 12 years. And the issue of superiorly qualified or someone saying this person is superiorly qualified, that's laughable as well, because that's a subjective topic and term. Even saying someone is qualified, we went through this during the presidential election. All this talk about how Vice President Harris was more qualified than someone that had the job previously, and they didn't do a bad job. No matter how much you hate the man, his first term as the president of the United States, he did not do a bad job. By the time old Joe came around and ran against him, yes, there was fatigue, but it's interesting that that fatigue did not last long because he won again. And welcome to the show, Dorian Denard, Karen Winston. I mentioned you already, as well as William Martin. Thanks for joining me this evening. So people, and thanks for sharing that, Karen. So people need to understand, take the emotions out of it. I'm a person that do my research. I'm going to do my research when it comes to politics. I don't just pull shit out of my ass and say, this is that. When I present information to you, it's going to be something that has been well researched. It is no different than what I was doing for the 11, 12, 13 years. I was a political blogger for the Detroit News. My information came from doing the due diligence to not change minds, but give people a different perspective on how to look at things and how to think about things. That was my objective when I was writing for the Detroit News, political blogs, for that period of time that I was doing it. So we also have to understand that it is up to the citizens to do their due diligence well, because people now want to talk about how if people would just vote, things can and would be different. Well, that's not true either, because at the end of the day, people need to understand voting has not been a priority in the city of Detroit for municipal elections. It just hasn't. Going all the way back to 1997, turnout, 29%. 2001, turnout, 22%. 2005, turnout, 37.03%. 2009, 22%. 2013, 25%. 2017, 21%. 2021, 18%. And then during a special election, back in February of 2009, there was an abysmal 14.6%. So again, it's a combination of people have just given up because they don't feel that the candidates are representative of them, or they feel that it's a waste of time to vote because the quality of life has not improved based on the promises made by those that asked for their votes. So all this, posturing, saying, just vote, please vote. We need to vote. No, you don't vote. So if candidates are not doing anything to get the vote out, they have to galvanize and mobilize the electorate as well. But if you're not a good candidate, because people have been saying, maybe this election would be more interesting had there been better candidates. Well, you did not demand better candidates, so you get what you get, and you get to vote for who you have come November the 4th, next week, or week after next. So you can't have it both ways. Thanks for joining me, Jill Sheridan. Appreciate you coming on, joining me this evening. So it's just not about voting. But as I ran off those numbers, those various numbers, so you look at 1997, only 29% of the people voted in the general election in 1997. And I don't need to give you the primary numbers because they were more pathetic than the general election numbers. So 1997, only 29% voted, which means 71% did not. 2001, only 22% voted, which means 78% did not. 2005, 37% voted, which means 63% did not. Again, in 2009, only 22% voted, 78% did not. 2013, 25% voted, simple math, 75% did not. 2017, 21% voted, again, 78% did not. 21.87, so 78.13. And then just 4 years ago, less than 20% went to the ballot to vote in the general election in Detroit. 18.6%. So for people to keep saying it's all about voting, then why are not people voting? And that speaks to the hopelessness based on the numbers I just got through talking about, because the numbers have been consistent in the city of Detroit when it comes to child poverty, poverty overall, unemployment, violence in the city, medium household income, literacy rates for adults as well as children have been quality of life issues that continues to negatively impact and hamper a city that constantly talks about being a world-class city. With these numbers, it can be world-class. And even one of the candidates during the debate last week talked about the importance of having an educated workforce to get companies here. With these numbers, you're not going to get a company to come here. Why would they? They don't have the city does not have the resources to fill the jobs necessary based on the community agreements and all that stuff. So why would a company invest time and money doing research to come to Detroit to set up shop? And apathy is the enemy in politics. Well, politicians create that apathy, Jill. I mean, because if the citizens do not feel, the electors do not feel that candidates are worthy of their vote, they're not going to vote. So the apathy actually is more or less hopelessness. They don't see a way out for themselves in they do see a way out. They're moving out of the city. And let's be very clear. Back in 2013, there were three things that the current mayor said that you would grade him on with regards to rehiring him to be the mayor of Detroit. One, repopulating the city. If you want to call 2,000 people repopulating the city, when the city once had about 1.5 to 1.7 million people, and you want to get 2,000 people to move into the city, that's not repopulating the city. So he failed there. and was still elected twice more. Doing better with the educational system. I need not even say much on that because the numbers speak for themselves with regards to the literacy rates of adults and K through 12 students in the city of Detroit. And the third was reduce crime. Yes, crime has come down, but overall, there's still a crime problem in Detroit. So we have to understand that people will sometimes settle. I've long had the position that in 2020, the citizens settled. They were tired of the shenanigans of number 45. They chose to settle on a career politician, do-nothing politician. And that do-nothing career politician lasted one term. Then come 2024, excuse me, people felt that they just did not see enough. It's two things. They felt they did not see enough in the vice president, number one. And I think one of the main things that bothered a lot of people was the usurping of democracy of someone being placed in that position that was not elected by the people to be in that position to represent the people. So there's all kinds of nuances that is at play with regards to what happened in 2024. And we even go back to even 2020, when all of a sudden in 2024, I guess you have to call her a nominee, even though she was not voted on by the people. That person in 2020 dropped out before the first caucus was even held in 2020. And I've always had the position of asking people to prove to me or provide me a cogent rationale on how that person became the it person in 2024, when even in 2019, there was not enough strolling to the polls to get people interested in her because they did not show a great deal of enthusiasm for the former vice president. And that's why she dropped out of the race prior to the first caucus being held in 2020. And let me read this comment by, I think it's Jill Sheridan. Ideally, if companies could be enticed with tax incentives, if they will invest in the communities like the schools, mutually helping one another in a perfect world. In a perfect world, what's called a utopia, Jill, that would be the way to go. But instead of the companies, the business community investing in the community, what they do is pimp the community by getting these tax incentives that they do not need based on the amount of money that they're making. You know, there's a game tonight at Ford Field. I would love to know what the receipts are from the concessions and the parking facilities that are owned and or attached to Ford Field, the amount of money that is being made tonight. So the entertainment space is doing very well in the city of Detroit. You know, you have Little Caesars Arena, you have the Fox Theater, you have Opera House, you have the Music Hall, you have Ford Field, you have Comerica Park. They are doing very well. But conversely, the city, as far as the quality of life and social ills, that's where the problem exists. And where are the people to make that turnaround? And that is not what's happening at the present time. It hasn't happened in quite a while because the educational system is not something new with regards to the terrible numbers. We go back to the original school takeover under the Ingram administration and the Dennis Archer administration. That was something that people allowed to happen. I say allowed to happen based on the silence. So, and not doing nothing is allowing something to happen. That was not only a situation that was orchestrated by former Governor John Engler. He was given assistance with the complicity of, guess what? Members from the Detroit delegation that were also in Lansing that assisted in the school takeover of the DPS, which is now DPSCD. So there's all kinds of backstories that people choose to not do their research on. Then they just want to point fingers and place blame. But there is more to the story. And if you do not do the research to find out the story, narratives that people choose to go with are, in my opinion, false narratives, because all people are doing is parroting what they have heard and thinking that using that as the gospel. And that's far from the gospel when it comes to the issues of the business community and the politicians working hand in hand. And William S. Martin, data centers will drive up our water and electricity bill by 5 times. Well, data centers probably are not coming here. There's a reason why Ann Arbor and other cities are protesting the numerous data centers that are becoming or trying to come, because not only that, data centers will also be a hiccup for a lot of cities. Maybe it will come to Detroit because most people know that there's not an educated enough workforce. And the issue of data centers is a problem of an increase in the amount of AI. And AI, technically, in a lot of instances, are job eliminators. So there you go with the data centers. So not only will they drive up water and electricity bills by 5 times, they will also take away numerous jobs from the community. All 10 hit. Not sure what Miss Sheila, what you're saying for that. All 10 hit thumbs up for free. So we have to understand that there are numerous reasons. So, Mr. Duckett, thanks for joining me this evening. We will look back at the amount of capital that was sent to Detroit after COVID and mourn the lost opportunity to fix education, mass transit. We will be enraged by the waste and window dressing. Boom, bingo, Mr. Duckett. You are exactly right, because that was a wasted opportunity. What people fail to understand, and what people need to understand, particularly when it comes to education, the results of MSTEP, because MSTEP became the thing in 2014-2015 school year. Those scores were no better then than they are now. People constantly want to blame COVID for the scores. No, prior to COVID, scores were down the drain as well. So we tend to always want to look for a scapegoat, but not want to do the research to get to the bottom of how something happened. And most people regurgitate and or parrot what they have heard and will not do any research. No different than Project 2025. People regurgitated all 1,000 pages of that document, even though they did not read one single page of the document. Yeah, I was at an event in it was probably about June or July of 2024. It was about June, July 2024. And having a conversation with someone, I say, have you read the Project 2025? The person was like, no, this is what I heard. Then he just lost all credibility with me when he said he read the Cliff Notes. I'm like, bro, that's not a damn book. What Cliff Notes did you read? If you're regurgitating and or parroting something, just say that. Don't come up with some bullshit that you pulled out of your ass and say that you are proficient in Project 2025 based on some Cliff Notes. There were no Cliff Notes. You either read it and not understood it, or you did not read it and have no cause to say that you understood it. So, that's part of the problem with, society. People are too lazy to do what's necessary to speak on something intelligently. And you're right, Jill Sheridan. That's a concern, those proposed data centers. You are exactly right. That's why a lot of cities are bypassing them. But when you have locations that feel that getting jobs to their people will be a beneficiary of the data centers, then they are misleading the community, because there are numerous concerns with the proposed data centers, numerous concerns. But we have to understand, and those that have been, following me, be social media. I mean, I've only been on, Facebook since 2019. But even prior to 2019, I have been doing the best that I can to provide information on literacy. I mean, my journey into the literacy space began on March the 5th, 2017. It was on that day. I'm at my desk at work. The Crane's Business Magazine circulated through my office, and it was my turn to read it, check it off, pass it on. So I'm reading an article about a 12th grade Detroit Public School Community District student reading at a first grade level. Again, 12th grader, Detroit Central, 17 years old, reading at a first grade level. That was a moment in my life where I said, wow, this can't be true. So I started doing some research. Not only was it true, it was a norm in Detroit. The amount of kids that were reading below grade level was just astounding. So 3 months later, in June of 2017, I was reading an article that was published by the California Department of Education. 75% of Black boys K through 12 were not reading at grade level. So it wasn't just here in Michigan, Detroit. It was, 3,000 miles. I guess that's how far California, LA is, or the state of California in general, 3,000 miles. And you had 75% of K through 12 Black boys not reading at grade level. I'm like, wow. So I started doing some research state by state. New Mexico, Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Florida, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana. And it was abysmal with regards to the literacy rates of not just Black kids, Black and brown kids, but just children all over the country. And that was a point in my life. I say, wow, what can I do to make a difference? That was one of the man in the mirror moments. So I came up with this thing called 5K Run Walk for Literacy Awareness, to bring awareness to the problem that was killing the American K through 12 system, and adults as well, because I co-authored a couple of articles that appeared in Crane's Business Magazine, one with Mark S. Lee, and then the Detroit News with my good friend, Karen Dumas. And it was so interesting with the Detroit News piece that we did, because when the article was initially sent to be proofed, we were told that the 47% didn't sound right. I reached out to one of my resources, the Harris Literacy Project down at Wayne State University, that deals with adult literacy issues in particular. And I spoke to the director of the program. Her exact words, verbatim, to me, because I told her that the numbers are being questioned. I already knew the numbers. There was an article in Newsweek magazine that even stated the number. And I'm not sure why the editor of the opinion page did not do their due diligence. And the director of the Harris Literacy Project was like, no, give them that number, because the actual real number at the time, this was in 2021, so it was the year after the pandemic. The numbers after the real numbers was worse than that 47% at the time. And I say that to say that here we are, 2025, and you still have a 47% literacy rate for adults. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. And you're right, Miss Sheila. Research more, and the only way to validate truth. And you are absolutely right. So I bring up Willie S. Martin, you want to hide something, put it in the book. That is a saying that goes along in how people see our community. And I bring up the issue of education and literacy and what I've been doing in that space for a reason. And that reason being, last Thursday night, I was at the crib, just chilling. I can't even remember what I was watching on TV. It may have been one of the baseball games. It may have been one of the baseball games. And all of a sudden, I get a text message from someone at 9:51 p.m. So almost 10 o'clock. Out of the blue, I get a text message. How successful have you been addressing the literacy rate? Only 5% of DPS CD fourth graders read at grade level. You have a lot of work to do. So my response to the person was simple. Let's see. I have made an impact in Cincinnati, Ohio, Los Angeles, California, in Detroit, Ypsilanti, and Southfield. We'll be rolling out a plan in conjunction with a lead field soon. I am also a founding board member of a literacy nonprofit called MyRamp and was the inaugural regional director for my fraternity's National Reading Literacy Initiative. I have led numerous panel discussions on literacy in Detroit. I have written letters to over 100 elected officials and business stakeholders addressing the literacy crisis. So I would say that I have had a great deal of success bringing awareness to the crisis. The response from this person was, all the more reason to help Detroit. My response was that 5% is a lack of support from the community and elected officials. As part of the Washington Literacy Coalition, which I am, we are making strides due to support from the community. And my crusade has never been about just Detroit. That person's response was, it's a lack of action and an abundance of talk. Good luck. So I follow up with the person by saying, a lack of action, exclamation point. The very fact that there is and has been an educational crisis in Detroit for years speaks to the epitome of what the lack of action looks like. By the way, I have been on the board of a charter school in Inkster for 2 years, and I have been very deliberate about improving the literacy scores for our students at Inkster Preparatory Academy. Our NWEA and MSTEP scores have improved all but in 1 grade. That's action when people are committed to improve something. In Washtenaw County, the Washtenaw Literacy Coalition, of which I am a part, has committed to improve the literacy scores in the worst performing school districts. We have been important because we are committed to action, not just talk. The Detroit School Board brags about a less than 1% increase and still is at the bottom of the totem pole, and the critics and the citizens are so quiet that you can hear a mouse pissing on a cotton ball. I know what action looks like, and I will continue to walk it like I talk it. My being recognized by my alma mater, Eastern Michigan University, and with their Alumni Achievement Award, being recognized twice by my fraternity as the Regional Brother of the Year and receiving the highest chapter award in 2 Kappa Alpha Psi chapters, and the most recent recipient of the 100 Black Men of Greater Detroit President's Award is a result of my community involvement and making a difference. So no, brother, I have never been one to just talk. His response was, I didn't say you were. It's a lack of action and an abundance of talk. This is an assessment of the general problem. So you tried to switch the narrative to make it seem as if I wasn't doing what I say I am doing. And in me correcting you, again, you tried to switch the narrative. That being said, as a father of a candidate that's running for to be the mayor of Detroit, That's a conversation you be having with the candidate, not me. Not me. So have that conversation with your daughter. Don't have that conversation with me. I don't even live in Detroit, but I do what I can to assist where I saw a problem. You know, I'm on the board of a nonprofit as well as a mentor of a nonprofit. I received their Mentor of the Year award because I care about these 6th through 12th graders, of which are mostly Detroit kids. And we have a few from Warren as well as Grosse Pointe. So I am not one that just don't talk shit. I do shit. But again, and you're right, Mr. Duckett, a whole text at 10 p.m. at night. And I'm not sure how I even became a conversation of the, well, I don't even know how I found myself in that person's head. And good evening, Deborah Harris. But to send a conversation, a whole text message to question what I'm doing, when I could easily point to what's not being done by elected officials in the city of Detroit, someone who want to run for the highest position in the city, you know, don't come at me like that. Because again, I can present numbers to show and prove that the elected officials in Detroit have failed the citizens of Detroit over the whole 12 years. Your daughter has been on the city council. So come on, bruh. Let's keep it real. You know, you would have been better off calling your daughter or even calling Pastor Kinlock to ask him what he's going to do about education, or question him about what's going on with education, or calling Superintendent Vitti, ask him what he's not doing about education, calling the mayor to ask him that in 2013, you said that you were going to do this to improve education in the city of Detroit. And if you did not, they should not be electing you again. So for you to send this bullshit to me, when you're not reaching out to the people that are serving the citizens of Detroit, nah, I don't roll like that. And I walk it like I talk it. So hell, you would have been better off calling me saying, let's meet for lunch or coffee or something and have a discussion. But to try and be dismissive of what I'm doing when the citizens have elected people to provide a return on the investment of their vote, and they are not doing that, have not done that over 12 years. And I've only been doing this for 8 years. So come on, you know, so yeah, you're right, Mr. Doug. I was living rent-free in somebody's head at 10 o'clock at night. And that person could have easily contacted, as I said, the mayor, the school board members, the superintendent, other city council members, as well as the current senators. Alyssa Slotkin was not a senator when I sent my letter out to 106 stakeholders in Detroit. 106. So that's something else you could have did, Reverend Shortfield. You could have sent out letters to people to ask them what they're going to do about education in the city of Detroit. That's been abysmal for quite a long time. And to the credit of outgoing Senator Debbie Stabenow, current Senator Gary Peters, they were two of the 5 people that responded to my correspondence that was sent to 106 people on August 30th, 2024, after the MSTEP scores came out on August the 28th, 2024, showing Detroit again, not just at the bottom of the total poll, but in the state of Michigan, rated as the worst school district, urban school district in the state of Michigan, and one of the worst school districts in all of the United States of America. So, and you asking me about what I'm doing, you know, that should have been a conversation for your daughter and whomever else. Matter of fact, that should have been a conversation for all the donors that have been kicking money into a campaign based on whatever they're looking to get out of it in the future. So that's where the conversation should have been. So come on. And I wonder, well, he's here now, but we'll be talking in a minute. Let me see. And Jill Sheridan, you're one person. You're right, Jill. I'm just one person. It ain't all on you. It is not all on me, but I took upon myself to do what I can to make a difference in the educational literacy space, not just in the state of Michigan, not just in the city of Detroit, but all across the country. And you're right. What has the person who texted you done about it? Interesting question, Jill, because that person used to have a charter school that's no longer in existence. And I could do some research to find out why that school is no longer in existence. But part of it probably is due to the fact of the scores on the M step, or prior to the M step, you had MEEP. And if you are a charter school and you do not meet your if you do not meet the standards of education that is consistent with the district, the home district of your charter school, in this case, it would have been Detroit Public Schools. So if you're doing worse than Detroit Public Schools, that means you're doing a fucked up job. Mr. Clarke, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, man. No complaints. Glad you could join me this evening. I know you, got a busy couple of weeks coming up, and has been very busy.
Did you see that video?
You've been busy in so many aspects, and I'm sure you probably heard my, I won't say rambling, but it did kind of, piss me off last Thursday to get a text message, someone questioning what I'm doing in educational space and literacy when I've been doing it, paying for stuff, traveling on my own dime, and you had the audacity to question me about what I'm doing.
Well, if people are questioning what you've done for the community, Brother Eric, then they don't know who you are. And if you take a look at your Facebook for more than 2 seconds, you can see how involved you are. I'm still impressed, matter of fact, by the behavior and just the way that those young youth behaved when we did that podcast a couple of months ago. And it was just really great, man, to see what happens when we as Black men, quite frankly, decide to set time aside to invest in the minds and the future of our children. But I love what you do, because it's almost as though you realize that you've got to get them early. I think that's a part of the problem. You talk about test scores, and obviously when we have this debate, we talk about this, they base how many prisons to build based on test scores.
Right.
And so back to what you do, I think it's so important that we have these conversations in these spaces and talk about how we can reach our children at an earlier age. And so thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. We have to get you back over. We're starting back up on November 4th. So next, the week after next, we'll have you back over there very soon.
Awesome.
And at the end of the day, what people need to understand is that when I first got involved with that, it was just, I just happened to meet the executive director and founder of the program at an event that was hosted by Juwan Howard. Juwan Howard is the founder and executive director of Umoja Debate League. And we hit it off. I learned about his, it used to be called Whoa, before we renamed it. It used to be called Whoa, Whose House, Our House, before we renamed it to Michigan Urban Youth Alliance, MUA.
Okay. And
he was telling me, Elijah Richardson was telling me about what, MUA, Whoa was all about. I went by there first time, driving all the way from Ann Arbor after work, traffic and everything. And then once I saw the youth that was there, you saw for yourself when you came to speak to them and did the podcast, I saw so much promise in these kids that come from, all over the Southeast Michigan area, Grosse Pointe, Warren, Detroit, schools that they come from, Cass, Renaissance, UPAD, Southeastern, Warren Fitzgerald, Grosse Pointe South, one of the schools in St. Clair Shores, I forget the name of it, because St. Clair Shores has about, even though it's a small city, it has about 5 school districts within that city. And, I saw in them and I poured into them, and I just got to know them and, get to know their parents. And just like when I was very involved with my fraternity, we have a youth group. And one of the things I have to tell the parents, we're not here. And, Detroit, a lot of single parent households, women head of households. And I should tell them, we're not here to replace the dads. We're just here to provide leadership training for young men that we see promise in.
Yeah.
And what they can benefit from us, no different than the Michigan Urban Youth Alliance. We're there to do whatever we can to grow them and to become some amazing human beings later down the line. We don't and you saw when you were there, Whitney, we don't stress college. We just stress doing better from the time you're in the 6th grade to the time you get to the 12th grade. Make a decision for yourself. If college is for you, you go to college. If trade school is for you, you go to trade school.
Yeah,
But we have
I
to
think
just
that's so
be more,
important too. I think
right.
that's so important that you leave those options open and really encourage our young people to think and dream for themselves. That's really why I'm so excited, and quite frankly, that's what I've been keeping myself busy with since the election. Wasn't successful in the primary, but I was really, yeah, it's kind of getting back to what I loved and knew most is really storytelling. And so writing a series is kind of what I've been doing. But I mentioned that series specifically because we were very strategic about the storyline and about the characters that existed inside of this story. Because as we begin to have these conversations about, again, encouraging our children to dream, encouraging our children to really fulfill their greatest potential, it becomes apparent to us that our children don't have good images to look at. The music that they're listening to, the television that they're watching, and you see this because we're at a previous generation, but we now realize that the thought leaders are just musicians. You know what I mean? Back in the day, thought leaders used to be pastors, or thought leaders used to be thought leaders, but our thought people, the people that are feeding our young children, are simply entertainers, right? And so we've got to get back into creating entertainment, creating music, creating movies, creating film that encourages our children to be greater. Why? Because they see images and characters. And we know this, what it does to the psyche of a child when all the movies and images that they see are slaves, or women shaking their butts half naked, or brothers dealing drugs, or brothers, the entire movie is about a court case or something of that nature, right? And they are on trial versus being the lawyer, versus being the judge. And so that's what we've been doing. And just to kind of, again, work in tangent, because you say this all the time, no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. And so that's definitely what I've been doing. Just wanting to encourage our young people to see themselves in a different light. If you see a cop movie, I think it's necessary for our children, our young Black children, to look at a crime movie and be the judge instead of the villain sometimes, right? To be the lawyer who's helping somebody get out of jail versus the person who's trying to, proclaim their innocence. And so that's what we are very strategic about doing in this series that we got coming up.
And I have to give you credit because you came over there and spoke to the students and did the podcast. You did it in such a way that you made them so comfortable that when the Q&A of asking you questions, you answering, even you asking them questions, was just so smooth. And that's part of what leadership looks like, because you have to make people comfortable first and foremost, because people get shy. They're meeting someone for the first time. I mean, they're used to seeing myself. They're used to seeing Elijah. They're used to seeing Miss Jennifer. They're used to seeing Jalen and Ken and Zach. They're used to seeing us. So we bring people in for a reason, to give them a perspective other than seeing us all the time, listening to us, hearing from us. They need to hear from other people as well.
Certainly.
So just a quick question, because this is a question that one of the viewers, and actually she's a co-host of the Detroit in Black and White on Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. And you had the primary, but you didn't have to worry about running the primary, right? Don't you move automatically to the general?
Well, I move automatically to the general in the sense that I'm a write-in, and quite frankly, voters rather, still have the option to write me in on November 4th if they so choose. But I will say this, I will be transparent. I looked at what happened after the primary, and quite frankly, it did not look as though I had a reason to believe that, the amount of votes that I received would jump so exponentially. The statistics are in. If your name does not appear on the ballot, then that greatly reduces, the likelihood in which that you can win, which is why we laugh all the time about Mike Duggan, coming from Livonia, winning this mayoral election, but that's neither here nor there.
No, we don't laugh. We don't laugh. We shake our heads because the likelihood.
I say laugh. I use that term loosely, but what I want to say is that this past election cycle and running for office for the first time, which certainly wasn't something that I was planning on doing, it turned out to be a learning experience for me. Even Mayor Sheffield, who it looks as though may become the next mayor of the city of Detroit, she lost her first election. And so with that being said, regardless to how you feel about her, give good or bad, that just reminds me that this is something that it's a long game type of approach. And so I definitely learned as much as I certainly could throughout this first election, and I'm certainly not ruling out the possibility of running again in the future for office. So thank you. It was a great learning experience.
And also, just to be
shout
clear,
out to Miss Vanessa Moss. I'm so sorry. Shout out to Miss Vanessa. Good to see you. I hope that all is well. And Adolph Mongo and Mr. Lango and the gentleman from Mr. Trent. I don't know why I forgot his name.
Jim Nardone.
I hope that everybody's well.
And let me make something very clear. I do not dislike her. I know her. I do not dislike her. But I just want people to understand this. Being someone that's very involved in politics, I pay attention, and I just am amazed at the electorate allowing a violation of the city charter that they approve to be poo-pooed, and then trying to compare one candidate versus the other, calling one superior, calling one more qualified. Those are subjective terms when it comes to politics. When you have information, hold on, one second, Whitney. When you have information about there has not been success over the 12-year period of that person being in office. I mean, I talked about the statistics with regards to crime, poverty, children poverty, illiteracy, unemployment. So if you're talking about what you're going to do, when people can do their research and easily tell what you haven't done, that's how I vote. I don't get into favoritism. I don't get into liking someone. I damn sure don't get into first. Being first for anything does not mean anything to me when it comes to politics.
Yeah. We just have to do better messaging as storytellers, because again, I'm not for or against Mary or for or against Pastor Clarke. I'm for the best person who's going to move the city of Detroit forward in the most efficient way. But I will say this, we have to give proper credence to the fact that there are thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people who are watching this election in a vacuum, who don't know the history, who may not have been here 10 years ago, who for example, who doesn't understand the Kilpatrick story. Imagine, if you will, because we're talking about gentrification and we're talking about these other different things, what that translates to is people living in the city who don't know the history, but they have the same voting privileges. So what that means is that this comes down to the reality of the fact, quite frankly, that Pastor Clarke has got to go on the aggressive. He's got to go and get her. And you are an intellectual person who is connected to the stories and the polling and things of that nature. But there are a lot of people with the same voting power. I dare to say even more voting power, because they live in the city, that don't know Clarke. They don't know how great of a pastor he is. And whether or not he wins or loses this election, that should have no bearing on the great pastor that he's been. And we believe that he's going to continue to be. But I'm just saying that to say that a lot of people are going to be voting on November the 4th that have only been watching for the last 6 months. And I think it's fair to say, even objectively, that Mary Sheffield has been winning. If we're looking in the vacuum, if we're looking at the people that she's been able to bring together, if we're looking at the endorsements, if we're looking at the fact that people have either joined her team or decided to stay out of the way. Because I identified a couple of weeks ago his pathway. I did a podcast on what he needed to do to win. And one of the things that I said Clarke has to do in order to win this race is bring together everybody that ran against Mary. I'm talking about Todd Perkins. I'm talking about Miss Jenkins. I'm talking about all those other big, and he wasn't able to do that. You see what I'm saying? And so there are other elements that exist beyond the history, beyond the, Horace Sheffield never paid me my money back in 1980. You know what I mean? Like, there's other elements that are equally as important. And so not that one is more important than the other. I just think that it's important for us to raise that, because I think I almost speak for that generation, having not been in the city consecutively my entire life.
Right. Yeah. I mean, no doubt about that. But one of the things that people also have to understand is you have 100% of the people that complain when, you know, that number of people do not come close to voting. I ran down the numbers since, 1997, 29%, in 2001, 22%, 2005, 37%, 2009, 22%, 2013, 25%, 2017, 21%, 2021, 18%. So what that shows is that in all three elections that the current leader, and I put that in air quotes, there's never been more than 25% turnout at the polls.
You know what that means?
I did not get into the numbers when it comes to the primaries. They are abysmally embarrassing.
Mm-hmm. That speaks. When you're, when you have a student who can't pass, then it may be a bad student. When you have a couple of students who can't pass, it may be a student impacting other students. When you have a school that can't pass, it's the teachers in the system. And when you have that low of voter turnout that long, it speaks to the system. It speaks to the culture of what's going on in this city. This is the city where people ran for freedom. This is the city where people ran for liberation. And I believe that those pernicious devils that exist on the outskirts of our city limits, those people who are calling the shots actually in the city, I believe those are the people that we really got to highlight. We really got to have those conversations. We really got to talk about why people don't feel like they should be voting in elections. And we've got to go up the ladder as much as we can. I love the fact that we're getting ready to have a gubernatorial election. I love the fact that it's three parties. I love the fact that we are now almost forced to listen to everyone's perspective and talk about what it's going to really require to have your support moving forward. Because what you've been talking about for years now is the fact that this is not sustainable. We won't be able to.
And Mr. Duckett, and I have this comment on that Mr. Duckett has hit the nail on the head. The leaders of Detroit basically had a blank check after COVID and only achieved 51% poverty and a third grade reading level. In addition to that, to your point about voting, Vanessa hit the nail on the head. There is no turnout to vote initiative on purpose, because it also speaks to what she said about you saying how Pastor Kinlock should have coalesced some of the ones that did not succeed during the primary. But it's hard to coalesce with people when they have it in their mindset that the heir apparent has already been chosen. And I said that when Mike Duggan ran, even before he ran, one of the statements I made before Mike Duggan ran was that the business community and those that do not look like the majority race in Detroit have put a person in place to become the next mayor of Detroit. And this was before Mike Duggan ran. And I said that person was going to be a white person. Lo and behold, that person was a white person backed by the business community, many of whom do not live in Detroit. The citizens of Detroit allowed that to happen. But now they have an unmitigated audacity to talk about Kinlock not living in the city when they had no problem with a white man coming from a majority white city that had problems with black residents. So it's just the hypocrisy that bothers me more than anything else as well.
Elections are about timing. Elections are about who's running at what time. And quite frankly, that's Pastor Kinlock's hill to overcome. He's coming into this race. Listen, you've been in Detroit 30 plus years. You already know that people aren't going to show up to your party until, James Brown shows up. They're not going to be there first so my point is this. If he can't coalesce and bring people against and bring people against the status quo, the establishment candidate, if he cannot corral people and tell the story of what's going on in that second Detroit, because there are two Detroits, remember, if he cannot galvanize.
There's four Detroits.
But my point is, if you are running for office and you don't have the political prowess or the ability to pull those people together, then what you are literally doing is auditioning for mayor. You can't.
I'm gonna push back on that because there are four Detroits. There are the three towns, and then there's Detroit. You got Mid, Cork, and you said Midtown. Oh, Mid, Cork, and downtown. Those are your three towns. Then you got the rest of Detroit. But the pushback on what you're saying is this: when you have the business community that probably will want to support Pastor Kenlock, but when Pastor Kenlock is not that person that's going to go along to get along, that's a problem for the power structure. That's how politics works. That's how politics works. If you're someone that cannot be taken advantage of and or used, because what's going to happen is this, Whitney, the lack of her success, or even his success if he were to win, would be looked upon from outside looking in as we gave it back to them black folks and they fucked up again.
Oh, that's gonna happen either way. That's gonna happen either way. Yeah.
And Darren Nichols wrote an amazing editorial piece in the Free Press about that very issue. I mean, if you follow politics, you understand Detroit, you understand the dynamics of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Trust me, the blame game will be there.
But let me just, and that's post-election. And listen to me, brother. And I don't even think we can debate on that, because I think we agree 100% on that. What's going to happen, the narrative post-election? Once the blacks take charge, we know the narrative is going to slip a little bit. But that's neither here nor there. But what I want to drill down, though, is the fact that Pastor Kenlock here, he how can I put this in the proper context that really illuminates what's going on in this moment? Pastor Kenlock is supposed to win this going away. He's supposed to win this easily. Why? Because the narrative is that all the decision makers, all the people with money live outside of the city, and they come in to make all the decisions. And we all know, as a result of this 2024 election, that money can only do so much. Money can only have so much influence. This is the role that he's taken up on, the guy that's from the streets, the guy that's from the neighborhood. So in theory, there's, six in this hand, half a dozen in the other. And I say that because if in fact the powers that be come drive in from Royal Oak straight into downtown, control the city, spend their money, and drive back out, then it should be no issue with him to galvanize all of the individual voters that live in the city. He's an exciting candidate. And so again, and let me just be clear, because it sounds almost as though I'm, supporting Mary Sheffield. I'm not even against Pastor Kenlock. I just think that his visibility has been lackluster. His storytelling has been lackluster. And quite frankly, his campaign has suffered from a lack of bright ideas. The type of ideas, watch this, not ideas, not just saying something. I'm talking about the type of ideas that would allow or that would compel someone to go against the status quo candidate. We got
to go, but your point is interesting, because the stories or ideas that are being told by his opponent, research shows that people were to do the research that her story makes no sense. But people choose to want change. Yeah. At the same time, talk out both sides of their neck and go with the status quo. And that's the problem with politics.
Can I say this real quick? I would love to see Pastor Kenlock run for mayor. If we could go back and do this over again with a legitimate, and this is no offense to anybody, no offense to him, with a legitimate, national campaign director. Because I don't think, because if you go into Pastor Kenlock's church, you'll vote for him. The way his churches are ran, the way that he speaks, listen, it's immaculate. But that hasn't, and we're closer to the election than we are from it now. It wasn't able to translate. And I should be able, as a journalist, as a storyteller, I should be able to say that. His storytelling wasn't compelling. It did not come through. And we cannot forget the stupid little elements of voting, like being pretty. You know what I mean? Being a female. And it sucks, but it's reality. You know what I mean? And for me, it was great that I was married, right? In my situation, it's great that I was married, and that image helps, right? And so for Mary Sheffield, the fact that she's got some nice hair, you know what I mean, and light skin, and that doesn't hurt. And so All of those elements matter, but this is a very great, fruitful conversation. I definitely appreciate you for having me on. I'd love to come on every week if I could, and just, but I definitely thank you guys for having me on tonight.
Oh, I'll get you back on after the election, so I definitely will give you a holler after the election. I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join me this evening, and stay tuned because again, the election 2 weeks from tomorrow is the election, and then on November the 5th, we will. Well, actually, the night of November 4th, probably will know who win. Hopefully, there will not be no shenanigans with lights being turned off or misspelling the names, getting credit for not being right, but still getting credit. So again, thanks for joining me this evening, Whitney. I look forward to having you back on after the election.
Absolutely, buddy. Thanks again. Be safe.
All right, you too. So to all the viewers, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule this evening, joining me. Again, the replay of this will be available in about an hour. Like, subscribe, share as much as you can. Very good conversation. And until next Monday, the 27th, enjoy yourselves. Enjoy the rest of your week. And be safe. God bless. Love you. Peace.